Mom, I'm worried about Lily. She's pulled so far back from all of us. And the awful part is, I think I understand why. I think she spent her whole life believing she came second, and I don't know how to convince her that she never did. That was my sister Vivian's voice. She left those words on our mother's phone as a voicemail, years ago, never imagining that the person who would eventually hear them would be me, the Lily she was worried about. I heard them for the first time at the age of 64, standing in my dead mother's empty apartment. And they took the entire story of my life and turned it inside out. My name is Lillian Brandt. Everyone calls me Lily. I am 64 years old, and I spent 30-some years teaching art to high school students here in Manchester, New Hampshire. 3 decades of teaching teenagers to look closely at things, which makes it all the more humbling to tell you how badly, and for how long, I failed to see my own sister. I am going to tell you what was on that voicemail, but first you have to understand the 50-year story it overturned. I grew up the second of 2 daughters. My sister Vivian is 3 years older than me, and from my earliest memory, the arithmetic of our family felt obvious and fixed. Vivian was the bright one. She was quick and sunny and easy in the way some children simply are, and our mother, Helen, her name was, our mother seemed to come alive around her. I am not telling you my mother was cruel to me. She was not. But I grew up watching a particular thing over and over, and a child draws conclusions. I watched my mother's face when Vivian walked into a room, and I watched my mother's face when I walked into a room. And even as a small girl, I believed I could see a difference. Vivian got the lit-up face. I got the kind, even, slightly tired face. Vivian was delighted in. I decided somewhere around the age of 9, merely managed. And once a child decides a thing like that, she does not undecide it. She just grows up around it, the way a tree grows around a fence post, until the post is part of the trunk. I can give you the exact memory that set the post. I was 9, and it was a school art show, and I had a small painting hanging in a hallway, a clumsy little watercolor of our backyard. My mother came, and she stood in front of it, and she said kindly, "Well, look at that, you worked hard on it." And that was all. And it was not unkind, you understand. It was perfectly nice. But 2 weeks later, Vivian sang a solo in the spring concert, and I watched my mother's face during it, and her face was doing something it had not done in that hallway. It was lit from the inside. It was undefended. And 9-year-old me, standing in that concert hall, did the cruelest arithmetic a child can do. I subtracted one face from the other, and I named the difference, and the name I gave it was, I am the one she has to be nice about. That was the post. Everything I am about to tell you grew around it. I want to tell you what that belief did to me over 50 years, because it did not announce itself. It worked quietly. It did not make me hate Vivian. That is the thing people expect, and it is not what happened. What it did was subtler and sadder. It made me withdraw. Slowly, across decades, I built a careful distance between my sister and me. Not a wall, nothing dramatic, just a polite, managed, arm's-length distance. I told myself it was simply our personalities. But the truth was that I had decided I was the less loved daughter, and a person who believes she is loved less begins, protectively, to stop reaching. I did not call Vivian much. I kept our conversations light and short. When she reached toward me, and I have had to face now how often she did, I met her with that same even, pleasant, slightly closed face I had once received from my mother. I had spent my childhood feeling held at arm's length, and somewhere along the way, I had picked up the arm and started doing the holding myself. I want to be precise about how invisible this was, even to me. I never once thought of myself as the distant sister. In my own mind, I was warm. I was simply private. I sent the birthday cards. I showed up to the family gatherings. I did everything a good sister is supposed to do. I just did all of it from behind glass, pleasantly, with the real self kept somewhere Vivian was never invited. And because the visible duties were all performed, no one could point to a single thing I had failed to do. The distance I was building did not look like coldness. It looked like a slightly reserved, perfectly nice woman. That is the most dangerous kind of wall there is. The kind that photographs as a sister. 50 years of that. 50 years of a sister I kept at a careful, courteous distance because of a verdict I had reached when I was 9 years old. There is a particular kind of person I became because of that verdict, and I want to name it because I suspect some of you will recognize yourselves. I became self-contained. I became the woman who needs nothing, who is fine, who keeps her own counsel, and the world tends to admire that, tends to call it strength and independence, so the wall got reinforced from the outside too. But underneath, my self-containment was never strength. It was armor. It was a girl who had decided she was loved less, organizing her whole adult personality around never again being in a position to be chosen last. I did not let people close because being close was where the not being chosen could happen. And the terrible efficiency of it is that armor like that works. It kept me safe. It also kept me, for 50 years, exactly as alone as I had been afraid of being. My mother died 8 months ago. She was 91, and it was peaceful, and I am not going to dwell on the grief itself, because this is not really a story about losing her. It is a story about what she left in a drawer. Vivian and I divided the tasks after the funeral the way siblings do, and because I lived closer, the job of emptying our mother's small apartment fell mostly to me. It is strange, sorting a life into boxes. And in the drawer of her nightstand, beneath some papers, I found my mother's old cell phone, not her current one, an older one, several years retired, but still, when I pressed it, holding just enough charge to come to life. I sat on the edge of my mother's bed, and I scrolled through it the way you do, through photographs and notes, a small archaeology of a parent. And then I found the voicemails. My mother had saved a handful of them, and one of them, dated years earlier, was from Vivian. I want to tell you about the small things in that phone before the voicemail, because they had already begun, gently, to unsettle me. There were photographs my mother had saved, and I had expected in some braced corner of myself to find them weighted heavily toward Vivian, more pictures of the favorite, proof of the old arithmetic. They were not. They were even. There were just as many of me. There was one she had kept of that very watercolor, the clumsy backyard one, photographed crookedly off the hallway wall. My mother had photographed my childish painting and carried it from phone to phone for years. I sat there holding that, not yet understanding it, feeling the first hairline crack run through a belief I had treated my whole life as bedrock. And then I found the voicemails, and the crack became a collapse. I almost did not listen to it. It felt like eavesdropping on the dead. I sat with my thumb over it for a long moment. There is a particular hesitation that comes over you with the recorded voice of someone newly gone. It is a doorway you are not sure you should walk through, because a voice carries a person in a way a photograph never does. And I knew that pressing play would put my mother, briefly, back in the room. And there was something else holding my thumb still, something I only understood later. Some buried part of me did not want to hear my sister talk about me to our mother, because I was certain I already knew what that conversation would sound like, and I did not think I could bear hearing the old arithmetic confirmed in Vivian's actual voice. But it was my sister's voice, and my mother had chosen to save it, and I pressed play. And I sat on that bed, and I listened to Vivian talk to our mother, in a conversation I was never, ever meant to hear. I should tell you what it is, physically, to hear a voice you have known your whole life say a thing it has never said to you. I had heard Vivian's voice tens of thousands of times across 64 years. It was as familiar to me as my own. But I had only ever heard it aimed at me, performing the careful, pleasant, slightly cautious register that 50 years of my wall had trained it into. Now I was hearing it unguarded, aimed at our mother, saying things it had never risked saying in my direction. It was like hearing a song you thought you knew completely and discovering there had been a whole verse, the truest verse, that had simply been cut every time it was played for you. I sat on my mother's bed and listened to the verse my sister had never dared sing to my face. The voicemail was long, as voicemails to mothers sometimes are, and it was almost entirely about me. My sister, years ago, had called our mother specifically to talk about Lily, and what she said was the precise and total opposite of 50 years of my life. She told our mother she was worried about me, about how far I had pulled back from the family, and then she said the thing that broke me open. She said, "I think Lily has spent her whole life believing she came second to me. And Mom, I have to tell you, I think we let her believe it. I don't think you ever meant to, but I watched it happen, and I never knew how to fix it, and it kills me, because she has no idea. She has no idea that I have spent my whole life a little bit in awe of her." In awe of her. My sister. The favorite. The lit-up one. I sat in my dead mother's bedroom, and I had to put the phone down on the bed because my hands were not steady. 3 words. In awe of her. I need you to understand that those 3 words were not new information being added to my life. They were a wrecking ball swung at the load-bearing wall of it. Everything I had built, the self-containment, the careful distance, the entire architecture of a woman who had organized her life around being the lesser daughter, all of it rested on the foundation that my sister looked down on me, or at best, looked past me. And here was that foundation, in Vivian's own unguarded voice, simply not existing, never having existed. I sat there and felt the structure of 50 years go unsteady all at once, and I did not yet know whether what would be left standing, when it settled, was grief or freedom. It turned out, in time, to be both. I listened to the rest of it, and then I listened to the whole thing again, 4 or 5 times, and I am going to tell you what my sister said, because every piece of it dismantled something I had believed for half a century. Vivian told our mother that she had always known, even as a girl, that something in our family was unbalanced, that she got an ease and a warmth that I had to work for, and that she had never understood why and had never known how to give it back. She said she had spent our childhood feeling quietly guilty and our adulthood feeling quietly rejected, because, she said, every time she reached toward me, I seemed to hold her off, and she had slowly come to believe that I did not much like her. She told our mother that she envied me. She envied that I had become an artist, that I had built something with my own hands and my own mind, that I had a kind of depth and quiet she felt she had never developed because everything had always come too easily to her. She said, and this is the sentence I will carry to my own grave, "Lily thinks she was the overlooked one, but Mom, from where I stood, I was the spoiled one, and she was the interesting one, and I would have traded places with her in a heartbeat. I just never had the courage to tell her, because she'd built a wall, and I assumed the wall meant she didn't want me." There was one more thing in that voicemail, near the end, that I have not been able to stop hearing. Vivian's voice dropped, the way a voice does when it reaches the thing it actually called to say, and she told her mother, "I keep thinking I'll just tell her. I'll just call Lily and say all of it. But every time I pick up the phone, I lose my nerve. Because what if I'm wrong? What if she really just doesn't care for me, and I make a fool of myself reaching for someone who let go a long time ago?" And our mother, apparently, had saved that. My sister had stood at the same locked door I had stood at for the same 50 years, each of us with our hand raised to knock, each of us certain that the silence on the other side was a rejection rather than a mirror. 2 women, 3 years apart, spending half a century in the identical loneliness, each one believing she was the only one in it. I want to be honest about what those words did to me, sitting there, because they did not only bring relief. They brought a terrible, retroactive grief, because for 50 years, I had been telling myself a story in which I was the wounded party, the daughter who was loved less, the sister kept at arm's length. And the voicemail revealed that the wall in our family, the actual physical distance between Vivian and me, had not been built by her, and had not been built by my mother. It had been built by me. My sister had spent 50 years reaching toward me and meeting a closed, courteous face, and concluding reasonably that I did not want her. The distance I had spent my life grieving as proof that I was unloved had, in fact, been my own construction, the protective wall of a 9-year-old, maintained brick by brick into my 60s. I had not been the victim of that distance. I had been its architect, and my sister had been standing on the other side of it the whole time, loving me, in awe of me, and assuming the wall was my answer to her. I made myself sit with the full weight of that, because I think I owed it to the 50 years. Every cool, brief phone call I had ever given Vivian, I had experienced those, in the moment, as self-protection, as a wounded woman keeping her guard up. But the voicemail forced me to see them from the other side of the line. From Vivian's side, each of those calls had been a small rejection, delivered by me, to a sister who was reaching. I had cast myself, my whole life, as the one who was not chosen, and in doing so, I had become, without ever noticing, the one who did the not choosing. 50 years I had spent waiting to be reached for, certain no one would, while a sister reached, and slowly gave up and grieved. The victim and the architect, it turned out, can be the same person. That is the hardest sentence in this whole story, and it is mine. The hardest part, in those first days, was my mother, because my mother was gone, and there were things I suddenly, desperately needed to ask her and never could. Had I been right at all? Had there truly been an imbalance? Or had a sensitive child simply misread an ordinary mother's ordinary face? I will never fully know, and I have had to make my peace with not knowing. But the voicemail gave me Vivian's answer, and Vivian had been there, watching, and Vivian said the imbalance was real, but that it was never anyone's cruelty. Just one of those quiet, accidental weather patterns that form over some families, where one child happens to fit the parent more easily than the other, and no one ever names it, and everyone is a little bit hurt by it in private. My mother, I have decided to believe, did not love me less. She loved me less easily, perhaps. I was the harder daughter to read, and she was not a woman with the gift of reaching across that kind of gap. But the voicemail made one thing unbearably clear. Whatever my mother's love looked like from the outside, it had not been absent. It had simply gone unspoken, and I had spent 50 years treating the silence as a verdict. I have come to think that my mother knew. Not in words, not in a way she could ever have sat us down and explained, but in the way mothers know the weather of their own children. I think she watched her two daughters drift, each one nursing a private and opposite wound, and I think it grieved her, and I think she did not have the tools to fix it. She was not a woman who could say the large things out loud. That, I now believe, is the very gap my whole misunderstanding grew in. But she saved that voicemail. Out of years of messages, she kept the one in which her older daughter said the true thing her younger daughter most needed to hear. I do not think that was an accident. I think it was the closest my mother could come, in her own quiet and indirect language, to repairing us, leaving the truth somewhere it might one day be found. It took until after her death, but she left the door unlocked. I did not call Vivian. Some things are too large for a phone. I drove the 4 hours to where she lives, and I knocked on my sister's door, and when she opened it and saw my face, she knew immediately that something had happened. When she opened the door, I almost lost my nerve entirely. 50 years of a wall does not come down because you have driven 4 hours. The habit of distance is its own kind of gravity, and standing on my sister's porch, I felt every brick of it still in place, urging me to keep it light, keep it brief, keep myself safe. And I understood, in that moment, exactly how Vivian must have felt every time she picked up the phone to call me and lost her nerve. I made myself walk through it anyway. I sat in her kitchen, and before I could talk myself out of it, I played her the voicemail. I watched my sister hear her own voice, years younger, talking about me to a mother who was now gone, and I watched her remember leaving it, and I watched her cry. And then I told her the truth I had driven 4 hours to say. I told her that I had spent my entire life believing I was the second daughter, the lesser one, the one loved last, and that I had built a wall out of that belief, and that the wall she had spent 50 years bumping up against had never been a message that I did not want her. It had been a scar. I told her that I had not known, that if I had heard, even once, at 20 or 30 or 40, the things she had said into that phone, the whole shape of my life and our sisterhood would have been different. And Vivian, through tears, told me her own half of it, that she had spent 50 years believing her cool, accomplished, self-contained younger sister simply did not have much use for her, and that she had grieved that quietly for decades, and had never once imagined that the self-contained sister was, on the inside, a 9-year-old still certain she had not been chosen. We sat in that kitchen for most of the day, and what undid me most was not the apologies, though there were apologies flowing both directions. It was the inventory. We started, almost without meaning to, going back through specific moments, a holiday, a wedding, a hard year, and telling each other what each of us had actually been feeling underneath it. And almost every single time, the truth was the same shocking shape. We had both been lonely in that moment, and each of us had looked across at the other and assumed she was the one who was fine. At my own father's funeral, Vivian told me, she had longed to lean on me and had not dared because I had seemed so composed. I had been composed, I told her, because I was holding myself together with both hands and had no idea my sister would have wanted to be one of them. 50 years of standing 3 feet apart, each of us certain the other one needed nothing. We laughed about it eventually, the broken kind of laughing that is mostly grief. 8 months have passed now since I found the phone. Vivian and I are sisters in a way we have not been since we were small children. Since before I was old enough to do the terrible arithmetic that ran the next 50 years. We talk constantly now. We have started, gently and with some tears, the strange work of going back through our shared childhood and telling each other the truth of how it had actually felt from the inside, and discovering, over and over, that we had both spent it lonely, each of us certain the other one had it better. We cannot get the 50 years back. I am 64, and she is 67, and we are honest with each other that we are furious at the waste of it, at the decades of sisterhood lost to a misunderstanding neither of us ever thought to check. But we have also decided not to spend whatever years are left grieving the ones that are gone. We have a great deal of sisterhood still in front of us. We have chosen to go and live in it. There's a small thing we do now that I treasure more than I can explain. When Vivian and I get off the phone, we say the thing, out loud. Not the automatic, throwaway, love you, that families toss over a shoulder while hanging up, but the actual thing, sometimes clumsily, sometimes more than one sentence of it. I tell my sister I am glad she is mine. She tells me she is proud of me, that she always was. We are 2 women in our 60s practicing, late, and a little awkwardly, a sentence we should have been saying since we were girls. It felt strange at first, almost embarrassing. It does not anymore. We have learned the hard way that a feeling kept inside a person, however large and however true, does no work in the world at all until it is said. So we say it. Every time. We have 50 years of unsaid things to make up for, and we have decided to be greedy about the time we have left to say them in. I kept our mother's old phone. I did not delete the voicemail. I could not. It sits in a drawer in my own house now, charged, the way it sat in my mother's. And I think about the strangeness of it often, that the single most important thing anyone ever said about my place in my family, the words that could have saved me 50 years of feeling unloved, existed the entire time, recorded, preserved, sitting in a drawer. My mother had saved that voicemail. I will never know exactly why, but I have chosen to believe she kept it because she knew it was precious, because somewhere in her, she understood the truth of what her 2 daughters felt about each other and could not say it herself, and saved the recording of the one daughter who could. I want to leave you with the 2 things this taught me. The first is about the verdicts we reach as children. Somewhere around the age of 9, I decided I was the less loved daughter, and I want you to understand that I never revisited that decision. Not once in 55 years. I simply carried it, fully formed, from childhood into old age, and let it quietly govern how I treated my own sister. We do this more than we know. We reach a conclusion about our place in our family when we are far too young to judge the evidence, and then we never reopen the case. We just live, for decades, as the defense rests. So I am asking you to do something I failed to do. Take out the oldest, heaviest belief you hold about your family, the one about whether you were wanted, valued, chosen, and ask yourself how old you were when you decided it, and whether you have ever, even once, checked it against the people who are actually still alive to ask. A 9-year-old's verdict is not a life sentence, unless you let it be. The second thing is about the difference between unspoken and unfelt. My mother loved me, I believe that now, but she did not have the gift of showing it across the particular gap between us, and so her love went quiet, and I spent 50 years reading the quiet as proof of absence. My sister was in awe of me and never said so, and I read her silence as disregard. We treat the people who do not voice their love as people who do not feel it, but a feeling that was never spoken aloud is not the same as a feeling that was never there. Some of the people around you love you in a language you have not learned to hear, and some of them are simply waiting, the way Vivian waited 50 years, for you to lower a wall they assumed was meant for them. Do not let another decade pass mistaking someone's silence for their verdict. Ask. Reach. Say the thing out loud. What goes unspoken in a family is so often not unfelt, only unheard. If this story landed for you, drop the word voice in the comments below. I read them. It tells me which stories are worth telling next. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one before I go. First, the verdict you reached about your family as a child deserves to be reopened. We decide, far too young, where we stand, whether we were the wanted one, the favorite, the afterthought, and then we almost never revisit that ruling. We carry a 9-year-old's conclusion into our 60s and let it quietly govern how we love the people closest to us. But a child is not a fair judge, and the case is not closed simply because you stopped looking at it. Take out your oldest belief about your place in your family, ask how young you were when you settled it, and find the courage to test it against the people still here to ask. You may have been wrong for 50 years. Second, silence is not the same as absence. Many people love in a language that never quite reaches words. A parent who could not say it, a sibling who never found the courage. And it is dangerously easy to read that quiet as proof that the love was not there at all. But unspoken is not unfelt. The warmth you assumed you never had may simply have gone unvoiced, and the person you assumed disregarded you may have been waiting, for years, on the other side of a wall they thought was yours. Do not mistake what was never said for what was never true. Reach first. Ask out loud. The thing you most needed to hear may have existed the whole time, just never spoken. What goes unspoken is not the same as unfelt. I'll see you next time.